Alright folks, I thought I would do a quick little video here that would probably help a lot of people when it comes to chemicals in their pool and what they should do if their pool turns green and or if they're trying to they're having maybe some algae outbreaks and they don't know why. First and foremost, the very first thing I would do is get a good test kit that works based on titration and not based on color. Right? What do I mean by that? Well, the test strips that you use, so you dip it down in and you're trying to figure out, is that this color of purple or that color of purple? Those things are horrible and they're not accurate. So much can throw them off. If your pH is a little too high or too low, if your chlorine is a little too high or too low, that can throw off other test results. Those things are garbage. I would not use them. A lot of folks take their water to pool stores. That's fine. Although I would say these test kits are every bit as good, sometimes even better than what pool stores are doing, depending on who's working at the pool store and kind of how much time they've invested into understanding the chemistry, really, and not just trying to, give out what the computer gives. So Trouble Free Pools is a forum that I follow, and from there they have a link out to some test kits. These look very much like the Taylor test kits, so if you want the Taylor ones, that's fine. But this is what I buy. Actually, I buy the refills now. These test kits you can get for saltwater or regular pools. The Pro comes with like a pH meter and like a magnetic stir bar to make things a little easier. And then the 100 still comes with a pH tester, but it's not like a digital readout. Right? It works off drops again. But it comes with the whole sort of tests that you need. And pretty much the only reason I go to the pool store anymore is if I can't find a particular chemical, which most of the time is some chlorine, right? But that's the biggest thing. I'll repeat that time and time again. Get a test kit that works off titration like this. Most people will see this price and think, man, that's super expensive, because they're trying to compare it to those test strips. You can't do that, right? You buy this kit one time, it'll last you throughout the whole year. And you're going to know exactly what your tests are, what your pool's reading. The other thing I like about these titration kits is you're talking about the difference between a half a part per million on some of these readings. That's how fine scale it is. When you use test strips, sometimes it's going to tell you, is your chlorine 0 to 5 parts per million, right? Or is your pH from 7 to 7.3 or something like that. It gives you those ranges. With a test kit like this, you can literally know, is your chlorine 2.5 parts per million or 3 parts per million, right? It's super detailed. And again, I just cannot recommend them enough. Right? Get you a test kit like this. Once you've got a test kit like this, the other thing I would suggest is, you don't have to get this, but as far as making it easier to know what to add and when, I would suggest getting this Pool Math app. So you just go to an app store, look up Pool Math, and you'll find it. And you can use it free, but you also can subscribe, which I do. I think it's like $7 a year. And when you subscribe, it'll store all your data and kind of keep track of that each time that you log a result. Right? And so this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Most of these test numbers I'm not terribly worried about, except for two. Right? Well, I mean, pH is important, and I think most people know that. But if you'll notice, it gives you what your ranges should be, right? So 7.2 to 8, 3 to 7, 50 to 90, so on and so forth. I think the one that most people don't pay enough attention to are their stabilizer levels. You should be adjusting your free chlorine based on this stabilizer level. So if you don't know what your stabilizer is, and you're just adding chlorine, you're just shooting in the dark. I even know, so pool stores, one year, my stabilizer level was through the roof, and they were still suggesting that my chlorine be, about 3 parts per million, and that's nowhere near enough for the stabilizer level that I had. But the thing I like about Pool Math is, so let's say I went in and I did a test, and I got my results, and I wanted to enter it. Right? Well, first thing I usually test would be my stabilizer when I'm first opening my pool. Stabilizer is not something that's going to be changing too much throughout the year unless you do a lot of pool water draining or just get tons and tons of rain, or you add a lot of water or whatever. Just regular use, your stabilizer levels aren't going to change too much. Before I get into that though, places that you get some places that you'll add stabilizer and not realize it. Tablets are stabilized chlorine. Chlorine that has dichlor or trichlor in it as the active ingredient, those are stabilized chlorine. So if you're adding a lot of that to your pool, then you're adding a lot of stabilizer to your pool and you don't realize it. If it's liquid chlorine or if it's cal hypo, those two aren't stabilized chlorine, and so if you're adding those, then you're not adding a bunch of stabilizer to your pool. Right? So let's say I did a test and I want to go in and log it. So first thing I want you to pay attention to is, notice right now my stabilizer, that's the cyanuric acid, that's what that stands for. Although CYA is probably accurate here. Notice here it's 40, and then based on this 40, I want you to watch this target free chlorine. So right now notice it's 3 to 7, right? But let's say I open my pool and I want to log a result. And so let's say I go in, and when I start off, let's say my chlorine is 0, my combined is 0. Let's say my pH, let's say it's 6.5 this time. I'm not worried too much about my alkalinity and hardness. But let's say, for whatever reason, let's say my CYA is up to 60. Remember, it was at 40 before. Right? And so let me log those results, and let's see what happens. Right? So now notice that CYA is up to 60. Look what happened to what my free chlorine should be now. It went up. Right? That's the thing that most people don't realize. As your stabilizer increases in your pool, the free chlorine in your pool should increase too. Why? Well, the way, without getting too much into the chemistry, the way stabilizer works is it kind of binds some of that chlorine so that when UV hits your pool water, the chlorine isn't taken out. Right? UV is one of the biggest chlorine sucks to a pool that there is. If you don't have any stabilizer at all, the UV is going to zap a lot of chlorine out of your pool quickly. Right? So that's the point of the stabilizer. Well, if you get so much stabilizer in your pool, it's going to lock up a lot of that chlorine, and it's not going to be effective at doing what it's supposed to do, like prevent algae growth. So as this stabilizer increases, so should your free chlorine. Right? So notice that I said it's 60 now. Right? That's what I got when I took my measurement. So now I need to increase my chlorine somewhere between 5 and 9 parts per million. Right? And that's easy to do. I know what my test is. I can go from there. Right? And then also notice that it gives you a little exclamation point for when things are maybe out of range or maybe getting close to being too high. Right? And so now you know that. Now you know, based on what the stabilizer is, what exactly should my free chlorine be. Right? Well, then your next question might be, well, how in the world do I know how much to put in? That's the other beautiful thing about this app, right? So now if I go up here and I open, a lot of people call this the hamburger menu or stacked plates or whatever. So if I click on that, right, I can go to effects of adding. Right? And so now, remember I said my pool was about 33,000 gallons, right? So whatever the volume pool is you use there, enter it. And I only use the liquid chlorine, which is bleach, right? Don't kid yourself. The only difference between the laundry bleach in the laundry aisle and the liquid chlorine is the laundry bleach has some additives to it that the liquid chlorine doesn't, right? Like the splash proof stuff and the fragrances and all that. Also, for the most part, the liquid chlorine is a higher concentration, so it's usually 10%, whereas typically things like Clorox will be a little lower, maybe 5 or 7%, something like that. Right? But the thing I love about this is, based on my pool volume, so based on 33,000 gallons, if I'm using bleach and that bleach is 10%, it'll say it right on the bottle. It'll tell you what percentage it is. Let's say I want to add 1 gallon. Well, right here it tells me 1 gallon in 33,000 gallons is going to raise my free chlorine by 3. Right? It's also going to raise my salt levels by 5. I don't have a salt pool, so I'm not terribly worried about that, honestly. but that's something that I can measure if I wanted to. Right? And so then I could say, well, if a gallon will raise it by 3, I want to go back and look at my results, and I need to get somewhere between 5 and 9. So I probably need to add, instead of just 1, maybe I need to add 2, and that'll get me up to 6, which is probably where I need to be. Right? And that's just regular maintenance, right, if you want to do that. The other thing here is the chemical additions. There's a lot of things here, right? So if you're adding trichlor or dichlor, or if you're adding cal hypo and it's got some of the standard cal hypo percentages here, right? How much salt that you might want to add, how much acid will raise or lower the pH, right? So if I'm doing adding dry acid or whatever, right? So I'll just do dry acid. Right? So if I add, who knows, 30 grams, right? It'll tell you how much it'll raise. I usually use muriatic acid anyway. Let's see. If I added a half a gallon, right? So see, it'll raise my, or it'll lower my pH because you're adding acid. It'll lower the pH by 0.5. Right? Now, and again, that's the reason I love this, is because pretty much any chemical that you want to add, it's got it in here, and it'll tell you about what the effects might be. Remember I said that trichlor and dichlor are stabilized, right? So if I went to add some trichlor to my pool, right, and I wanted to add, I don't know, maybe I wanted to add 5 pounds of it. Right? Notice how much it raises my stabilizer. One of the reasons I tell people this is because sometimes a pool store will tell you that you can add trichlor to your pool and you don't have to mix it, right? And some people just love that. So they'll buy a bunch of trichlor, especially at the beginning of the year, and they'll just start tossing trichlor in there like crazy, and that's that. Well, for every little bit, actually let's go back to a pound. For every pound of trichlor you put in your pool, or at least mine at 33,000 gallons, I'm raising my stabilizer levels by 2. And you're like, well, 2, that's not very much. It's not, but remember that stabilizer is not going anywhere, right? So over the whole year, every little bit that I add is going to increase that level by that much, right? Same thing with dichlor, right? If I'm adding dichlor, and I'm talking about pounds, right? So again, 1 pound is going to raise it by about 1.8. Right? You're going to get some free chlorine out of it, which you won't, but it's going to raise your stabilizer levels too. And that's the important thing, is you got to know what your stabilizer levels are for your chlorine. Right? So again, I just love this app. I don't think near enough people know about it. The other thing I want to mention is, let me go back and show you what I did. If I click on free chlorine here, right, you can also access kind of what you should do. So remember, I use typically, where'd it go? I use bleach, right? And so it'll tell me about how much I should add to reach my target here too. Right, so just a little over 2 gallons will reach my target volumes. The other thing that I really like about this app, so a lot of people complain about, I went on vacation, I came home and my pool's green. What do I do? So what most people talk about shocking their pool or buying shock. Shock is just 9 times out of 10 when you buy shock, dry powdered shock. It's just cal hypo. It's just a type of chlorine. There's nothing special about it. But within the Pool Math app, what they've got here is something that they call SLAM. It stands for Shock Level and Maintain. If you go into the forums, the Trouble-Free Pool forums, they'll talk about what this process is, right? So shock, level, and maintain. Well, this little switch here that you see, If I turn that on, right, then it's gonna raise. So notice my free chlorine, right? So it should be between 5 and 9, and they're setting it at 7 here. But if I want to shock level and maintain the pool, notice it raises up to 24. Right? Well, why did it do that? Well, because if you come home and your pool is just green, I mean algae everywhere, you really need to get that chlorine level way high in order to kind of zap that algae. When that chlorine goes to work and it starts killing that algae, then the chlorine's not effective anymore. Right? So you need to get it way high, and you need to keep it there. Right? That's what the maintain part of shock level and maintain is. So you get that level up to 24, and what you'll see happen is you'll get it up to 24, and you'll come back in 6 hours and take another measurement, and it'll be down again. Right? But you want to get it up to 24, and you want to maintain it there for about 24 hours. Right? While you're trying to vacuum up the dead algae and all that. But again, the thing I like about the Pool Math app is you just turn that switch on and it tells you what you should get it up to. And then if I look down at the bottom, it's going to tell me here, well, I need, for my pool, which is 33,000 gallons, I need to get it up, I need to put about 8 gallons of chlorine in there. Right? Well, if I don't want to use that, if I want to use maybe a 73% cal hypo, right, I need to put about 9 pounds in there. Right? And then that'll help me start to pull that down. Some of the things I see people recommend, there's some kit out there that people recommend using, especially for above ground pools. And essentially this is what you're doing with those kits. You just don't realize it, right? And mostly because, those mostly work because the amount of water that you have in those above ground pools is a lot less than 33,000 gallons, right? But again, that's why I really just love this Pool Math app, is because I can just go straight in here and do some tweaking a little bit and know exactly what I need to do to the pool, right? Whether I just need to maintain it or whether I need to shock it or whatever, right? So a good test kit and this Pool Math app, and it's going to save you tons of time. Again, in 3 or 4 years now, I have not added any algicide to the pool. People talk about using flocculant a lot. I've not had to add any flocculant to my pool. The other thing I see people do that I think is incorrect is when they're vacuuming, especially at the beginning of the year or when they've had a large kind of algae outbreak, they're vacuuming through their filter. No need for that, right? Put your filter on waste and vacuum. You're going to lose some water out of your pool, but there's no point in pulling all of that debris through your filter, right? Just run it out in the yard, vacuum as quickly as you can, right? So you're not losing a whole lot of water, but vacuum as quickly as you can, and then turn the vacuum off and put it back on filter again and let the filter do what it does. Instead of pulling all of that debris just straight through your filter. So I would almost always vacuum on waste if you can. That's something else that'll help tremendously. Right. Now, again, I could go on and on. I've been on this, about 20 minutes now. But hopefully this helps. Hopefully this gets some of you on the right track. Again, I would, if I were you, I would also visit this forum. Right? Again, it's called Trouble Free Pools. And especially pay attention to this pool school, because it'll talk about a lot of what I just did. Right? And so here, kind of what you should do if you get algae, some things about pool equipment, construction, how-tos, basic care. This thing is, the thing I love about the internet is forums. Right? There are forums out there for anything and everything, and the information is, there's not enough money to pay for the information that you get from here. And then the next thing you know, you're not going to the pool store anymore. You're not spending a ton of money on stuff. And you actually feel like you know what you're doing with your pool and you're not blind. Right? So hopefully this helps. I don't know, maybe you think it's garbage. Maybe it doesn't help at all. But one thing I like to do, I'm an educator myself, so one thing I like to do is try to provide people with information so that they can then do it themselves. Right? Because that's something else I like to do, is I like to do it myself as well. Right? But yeah, trouble-free pools, test kits, Pool math. Get it, enjoy.